Okay, good afternoon. Shut the stock market news off. For me, a great day for the stock market, not for me because I'm all in tech. So a terrible day for Amazon again. In fact, I think we'll be finished down. Oh yeah, great. Amazon down another 1.6% today. So I am still confident with that, with owning it. There will be a cycle back into it, but it's a very rough 3-4 weeks for tech. And what's happening is you're seeing a cycle. You're seeing people that have made a lot of money in the tech run up as COVID shut down, and everybody went to their tech stocks. Now they're all going to the reopening stocks that will do well as people get back out and going again. If you look at the last 3-4 weeks, what cruise lines have done and movie theaters have done and things of that nature, people are taking profits from one sector and move it into another sector. And so that one sector is taking a massive hit. It's a very quick, usually these moves take 3 to 4 months as people, reallocate their funds. We're seeing it happen in 3 to 4 weeks, and it's pretty impressive. So it's a good sign for the overall market. The other sign for the market we saw this weekend, Disney stock was flying today because we had the best, a few reasons. One, the best box office movie theaters in almost a year, which is a good sign. People are going back to the movies. And also California announced they can open theme parks. So April 1st, California's, amusement parks, which includes a Walt Disney World or Land or whatever it is, will reopen. So some really good news from an economy standpoint going to happen. If you're in Branford, we've been talking the last week or so about schools reopening. I did see today New York is reopening in a couple weeks. It kind of gives you kind of a baseline that if New York City can reopen their schools on 2 weeks' notice, there's no reason we can't do the same. And the agenda did come out. I just saw in my email. I'll pull it up now for this Wednesday. Now, parents signed a petition, and that petition forced a discussion item. I don't know that there's more to discuss, but it forced some action. And the agenda for Wednesday says one is a vaccination update, which is helpful. The citizens petition. So the agenda is a little odd that the citizens petition, where they all care about school reopening, is a discussion item before a presentation, which is after that. That makes no sense, but whatever. I would guess most people who have something to say in that citizen petition would be wanting to talk about the full in-person instructional model timeline, which is presented after that. So I question the order of things on the agenda, but that's not really a concern. It's on the agenda, and parents who worked on that should be commended. It was, one concern I had was, would it stay? People who are angry tend to gravitate towards these groups, and they tend to dominate them. And to the credit of the organizers, it stayed respectful, it stayed intelligent. They made logical points. They got their first win. Hamlet at least saying, "Here's a reopen date." That had to change the narrative to, okay, fighting for those things anymore. We don't have to go attacking anybody anymore. Now it's how do we move that down? I think, if I was to guess, I would imagine Hamlet's going to come up with March 29th. I only read that by saying April 19th minus a week. It was vacation week before that. It doesn't make any sense to go back a week before vacation, so at least 2 weeks before vacation. So I'm guessing the 29th, maybe the 22nd, but if he's presenting this on the 10th, I'd be surprised at that. But I think you will have some plan. There is no reason at this point not to reopen. It doesn't make any sense. Everybody else has. When you have New York City reopening, like the epicenter of this, and schools going back, I believe on the 15th, there is no reason for Branford to still be putting off what's happening, a reopening school. And so it's a little crazy. Hopefully we have some answers on that on Wednesday night. I think most parents, my gut feeling is most parents will walk away pretty, hold on, I'll move the mic a little closer. Sorry about that. Comments, good afternoon to everybody, to Vinny, to Richard, to Anthony, Jennifer, good afternoon. The sequence was, so it doesn't really make sense to have the public hearing portion of this first, and then afterwards have the presentation. The public hearing is going to be pretty much about the presentation. So that doesn't make sense, but of all the things that have happened and seeing so much progress, that's a small thing to complain about. So hopefully that'll be changed once we get there. But primarily, the first thing I want to talk, the most important aspect isn't the school thing. We've gotten some significant progress on that. Over the weekend, if you're in Branford, the Democrats did formally, we told you this last week, but formally announced their ticket for this year, which is Tom Brockett and Ray Dunbar. It's no secret I see significant issues with that ticket. It's a shame because they're not issues that I'm the only person who's seen. It's not new information. Tom Brockett's been a disaster on the RTM. He's, I don't know how to put this, dishonest. And it's been consistent. And he gets up and he takes credit for things he didn't do. He makes statements that are false. He is going after issues that make no sense. And for them to still end up with that name is disappointing to me. And it started early on. There was an issue in Branford with property rights at the end of a street facing the water, Crescent Bluff. And it was in negotiations for years, and it was way back to the DeRoss era where there were some major mistakes by the attorneys at that time. Jamie came in. It wasn't really a town issue, thankfully, but then it became one over time, and he had to step in, and they went to negotiations and lawsuits and all this other stuff. And it finally, after a long series of events, was about to be resolved. And Brockett gets up at the meeting and basically takes credit for something he had nothing to do with. It was this first indication that this guy's just a jerk. And this long speech that was negative and attacked the administration who had solved the problem. At the same time, he's taking credit for it. And I think everybody at the same time who pays attention to politics was like, what the hell? And it just was this red flag of something's wrong here. And then it didn't stop. He would give very organized speeches that were angry and mad, and they were dishonest and wrong. And it completely put other viewpoints and opinions in wrong lights. He pushed nonsense over and over and over again. And so that the party still said, let's go with this guy, either is indicative of they had nobody else. Now remember, last time they put nobody up. So that could be the case. Hopefully that's the case. I prefer that to be the case, because if you ended up with Brockett over some better option, that's unfortunate. Ray Dunbar, Ray Dunbar has done some things that were questionable. I've always felt differently about Dunbar, even as, because I don't think he's deliberately trying to mislead people. Brockett's deliberately trying to lie. He's just that kind of guy, and he's done it repeatedly. I don't see Dunbar giving these long nonsense speeches at the Board of Selectmen meeting. Yeah, what he did with, there was an issue where our second selectman, or our selectman, Jamie Cosgrove's longtime running mate, passed away, Joe Higgins. And Jamie wanted to put up his wife. And now, it's actually a phenomenal selection because his wife was at every meeting. His wife knew issues like the back of her hand. She was there all the time. It was also a sentimental selection as well, but she was actually very qualified for the seat. She knew her stuff. She knew the issues. She had sat at every single meeting I was at, she was at. And so he wanted to put her up. Instead, Dunbar put out something saying he would support Tom Brockett, which we were like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And then there was some, we had a podcast saying, what the hell, why would you ever, mess up a really good thing? Such a great story to put his wife up to finish the term, maybe even run again, who knows? And Dunbar came out with a thing, said, well, we didn't know it was her. If we had known it was her, we would never have done this. And then found an email dated prior to that where, no, we do not want that person. It was clearly a false information. That said, Brockett's, just kind of dishonest. And Dunbar, I never got that sense from. And so it's a disappointing ticket. It really is. I'm sad to see it, to see what the Democrats are doing in this town. And I have said this many times. I am a Democratic town. I was a Democratic town committee member. I'm a registered Democrat. And you go to each town, and the parties are so drastically different. Political parties are made up of the history of the people that are in them, not the national stuff. You join a political party for the national stuff. I saw so many people say, I hate Trump, so I'm joining my local Democratic town committee. Okay, so now you hate Trump, so you want Mono East paved? Like, how does that make sense? I hate Trump so much, I want to do Walsh School. Like, how does that make any sense? But that's the mentality. The leadership is typically people who have been there for a long time. And so those relationships decide and determine who's doing the right thing or who's not. It's not often what political party they are. My experience in Branford, where the Democrats are a little bit nuts and very much disorganized, it was the opposite in Guilford, where the Democrats I found to be logical and reasonable and intelligent. I remember, Pat Widlitz and I forgot her first name, Wallace, and people who were smart, really on top of their game, and cared about their town first and foremost. Yeah, they got involved in national stuff, but they cared about their town first and foremost. So two drastically different parties in groups and how they behave based on what town they were in had less to do with the actual ideology of a party. In Branford, the leaders of the Republican Party are like all about Branford. The Jamie Cosgroves and the Ray Ingrahams have been here forever. They're part of the fabric of the town. The head of the Democratic Party has been here for 15 minutes. He's a kid and he's a political operative. So, those are drastic differences that you have. Brockett is dying to run for office, dying to get that top seat. Jamie Cosgrove, they had to convince to run. He said no repeatedly before they got him to run. Because it wasn't, career politician was what he wanted to be. Isn't what he wanted to be. So Branford's in good shape. It's a phenomenal town from a living standpoint, from a financial standpoint where we are. We're glad to be living. I'm glad to be living in Branford throughout this crisis. I don't think the voters will make a change. I'm just saddened to see. I kind of hoped, people who had seen within the party what I had seen for the last few years with Tom Brockett would say, let's get somebody else involved. And they didn't. And I'm guessing that's primarily because that's who they had. So that's that. It's a little early. I mean, we're talking March. They put out a press release on the 7th. They filed the end of February. So we're talking about 8-9 months of the Democrats getting ready for this. So I think you might see a fairly contentious race. You might see some nastiness. Already we have letters to the editor that are completely inappropriate from Tom Brockett. Letter from the chair pushing national issues. And I don't see a reason not to think they're going to be doing this for 8 or 9 months. And it's disappointing, but it's what we're going to be facing as a town. And I hope it doesn't win. I hate that type of politics is nonsense, especially on a local level. So that's where we are with that. I will clearly be talking about that much longer. Usually we wait until September, end of August to have their conventions and caucuses and all that stuff to get going. But it seems like you have like an opening shot fired from the Democrats. And based on how they've behaved at some meetings, they're going to go after James. And so far they've made stuff up. They haven't had anything accurate to go after him on, so they've just kind of made stuff up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 7-8 months. But let's move forward to the stimulus package. So the stimulus package went to the House. It passed the House. It went to the Senate. It passed the Senate with some changes. If you are unemployed or getting benefits, you got some good news and you got some bad news. The good news is added to the benefits for you is a tax exemption for the first $10,000 of benefits you got last year. So that could be not a small amount of money. That could be a couple $1,000s that you'll get back if you paid taxes or had your taxes reduced from your unemployment. Not everybody did, but it's a significant difference. So that could be a couple $1,000s of money either back in your pocket or money that you don't have to pay. So that's a significant addition to that. One of the changes that happened with Joe Manchin, if you go back a couple months back, we talked about Joe Manchin having significant power in Congress now, being such a tight, with only 50 Democrats there. Manchin is a Democrat from a Republican state. So he will typically vote and push more conservatively. So the plan was to increase that additional unemployment payment. So people got unemployment right now. It started off as plus 600. It had been reduced to plus 300. It was going to go up to 400, but instead Manchin pushed it down to 3, and they needed his vote so that happened. So your unemployment will remain as is if you're getting it now through the first week of September. So that's the good news. The other good news, you're going to get $1,400. There's a really interesting survey the other day that said something like, of people between the ages of 20 and 35, like 57% of them were going to put at least half of the money into the stock market, which is phenomenal to hear. But I want everybody investing and saving as much as they can. The downside of this stimulus, there's a couple downsides of it. The Republicans, and rightfully so, in my opinion, made an argument that there's a lot of money that's basically Democratic handouts. Money that they added that really isn't necessarily exactly tied to COVID, that they always wanted to do before, but they've used COVID as an excuse to do it. There's certainly truth to that. The other downside is the issues with inflation. And to go back to our basic economic stuff that we learned in school, supply and demand is what determines what things cost. If there's no demand for something, you can't really charge anything for it. If there's sudden demand for something, a lot of demand for something, you can charge a lot for it. How that impacts the stimulus is suddenly you will have people, one, throughout this COVID, have saved a lot of money. They didn't go on vacation. They didn't go away. They didn't go to theaters. They didn't go to see movies. They didn't go to Broadway. They didn't, all the things that you normally do over the course of a year, take your family on a trip or two, didn't happen. So that money they would have spent if they kept working is now saved. And remember, unemployment's at 6.5%. That means the vast majority of people who want to work are working. And many people who are in the medical industry or the construction industry did very, very well last year and didn't have a place to spend it. So they're sitting on a lot of money. Now we're pouring in $1.9 trillion into the market. And when more people have money, demand for stuff goes up. When demand for stuff goes up, what happens? Supply and demand, the cost of that stuff goes up. And so inflation goes up. And so there are concerns now over what will inflation be? Will you hit 2, 3, maybe more percent inflation in certain sectors? And that's important because that's what impacts your ability to buy things and what the power of a dollar is. So I know there's people here that don't follow economics, so I'll describe this in very basic terms. For the last year, nobody went on a cruise ship. Cruise ship has a very finite number of rooms, right? Suppose there's 200 rooms on a cruise ship. Suddenly, you have people getting their shots and have a ton of money. A cruise ship room that used to be $2,000, they could probably get $3,000 for, or more for, because there's so much demand for that finite number of rooms. That's inflation, where in the past, where you had $2,000 would get you a room, that $2,000 won't get it for you anymore. That's important because there are negative impacts with this stimulus package. We have now passed multiple trillions of dollars in stimulus, and you're in a situation where people have the confidence to go back out again and have the money to go back out again. The concern from economists, not just Republicans, but the current concern from economists is, will that push up the cost of goods? When you drastically push up the cost of goods, who does that hurt more? The lower classes. So, you have $5 now. That $5 gets you a gallon of milk and a box of cereal. I have no idea if that's true or not. In a week, when there's demand through the roof for that milk and that cereal, it no longer buys you the same thing. If you're wealthy, you don't care. But inflation disproportionately hurts those lower classes. So Democrats are pushing this and pushing more money to those people. That's great. But stimulus will end at some point. So if we jack up the prices of all these things because there's so much demand suddenly, what happens 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the road to those classes? There are real impacts to government putting money into an economy. And It's not just Republicans raising the red flag on this budget. Some of that's political, but some of what they said is true. Economists are raising the flag on this as well. It could be very interesting what happens 3-4 months down the road when all this money's out there, people are spending like crazy, and then suddenly the stimulus ends. There's no more money coming out. At the same time, and Mitt Romney made this point, there's millions, or I should say billions, in this package going to many states that are doing quite well. And so what Republicans have called for. Now, listen, we take everything Republicans and Democrats say with a grain of salt. There is a political angle to all of it, right? They want to win some points. So we have to go back and say, is this a valid point? And in some cases, there are states that were either not run well before that are now getting bailed out, or have done quite well and did okay in this pandemic, that we're still saying, hey, we're giving money to these states. And for example, California was an example that Romney used that had a budget surplus, a record amount of money coming in, and it's still be getting billions of dollars in aid from the federal government. So they're looking at it as here's a massive payout to liberal-leaning states. There is some truth to that. And this is the bigger issue that we see with so many issues, is the matter of a false equivalence. We hear Democrats saying this is going to help this plan is needed, it's going to help the people, what have you. The question becomes, we can still help the people with a smaller stimulus. And I'm going to use the example of, in Branford, the Blackstone Library. So we talked, the Blackstone Library is not run by the town, it's run by a separate group in Branford. So if you're not from Branford, I'll give you a little bit of background. But we're talking about this concept of equivalence. And the Blackstone wanted to improve some things in their library. They wanted more meeting spaces. They wanted more, better, whatever, a bunch of different things that were happening. And they came up with a plan that was at one point $2 million, and $3 million, and eventually close to $5 million total to solve that problem. And eventually it would pass based on public sentiment, which was kind of mixed. But the question became, and this is the question I asked many, many times, you gave me problem X to solve, and then you came with a solution and weren't willing to have a conversation about another solution that solves that same problem. Now, just because somebody says, I need a vehicle to get to work, doesn't mean they need a $50,000 Mercedes. Just because you say, I need more meeting space, I need more X, I need more Y, doesn't mean you need a $5 million program. Just because we have an economy that's struggling slightly after a pandemic doesn't mean it has to be $1.9 trillion. But the political arguments always become yes or no on that solution. And if you question that, and right now you're hearing this from Democrats, Republicans are not for this plan. No, they were for a stimulus. They weren't for that plan. In Branford, there were Republicans that were for giving money and help to the Blackstone Library. What they weren't for was the $5 million plan you put forward. And this is something that's normal with Democrats. They stand up and say, oh my God, you're not for this. If you don't support this plan and you don't care about our library's done so much work. That's crazy. It's a nonsense argument. We see this with teacher contracts all the time, or actually, all union contracts. They did such a great job during the pandemic, they need an 8.3% increase. And if you don't support this, you don't support our teachers. I support our teachers. I can support them just the same as a 6% increase. Doesn't have to be an 8% increase. And so at the end of the day, we're getting these political debates, and these political arguments are always about one particular proposal, and they use these issues they have to support that proposal, but they're not willing to have the bigger discussion and the bigger argument. And that is, wait a minute, is that the only solution to this problem? I need a car to get to work. The only solution isn't a $50,000 Mercedes. You can get a $20,000 Nissan or a $5,000 used whatever. But no one wants to have that conversation. And then politics takes over, where if you don't support this plan, you hate the country or hate puppies and children or something or whatever. And that's what's happening on the stimulus package. So Chris Murphy jumps on social media, and he jumps and Democrats jump on and say the Republicans are against this and against helping the American people through this pandemic, when that's not true. Most of the Republican things that I've read said we support many of these things. The $1,400 payouts are only a small portion of this. Unemployment is only a small portion of this. But in the comments, it's like, we passed this $1.9 trillion bill to make sure you get $1,400. You could have done $1,400 with $300 billion. So at the end of the day, this is standard political nonsense where we equate falsely certain particular needs with only one particular solution, and we demonize anybody else's solution, any solution that's not ours. And so as a political analyst, as a consumer of news, this is something that should always be in the back of our heads. When somebody is promoting a plan, is that really the only plan that will work to solve that problem? It almost never is. Would I support a stimulus? Yes. Would I have voted for this 1.9 if I had no other option? Yes, I would. Would I have liked to have seen a package closer in the $900 billion to $1 trillion range? Yeah. Do I think there's states that are getting money that don't need it? Yes. And do I think, as currently construed, it will impact inflation? Absolutely. Everything is happening at the same time. Because of the vaccine, at the end of the day, people are now having confidence to go back out again. And you're seeing it. The numbers from the airlines are jumping significantly. Some of them thinking they're going to stop losing money this summer, which is spectacular where they were 6-7 months ago. And Steve, one of the comments just makes a very good point. One of the things we want to do going forward is an infrastructure bill. I want an infrastructure bill badly, if for nothing else, Branford, because I want to help to get Exit 53 done. I don't know if it will or not, but I'd like to see that be one of the projects we can hopefully push with some of the money that would come from that. But when you pass a $1.9 trillion infrastructure stimulus package, and it's overkill, and it could have been 900, that's an extra $1 trillion that could have been used for infrastructure, which we need, and also serves as a stimulus by putting money into the economy. So yes, there are negative impacts to passing a bill in $1.9 trillion when it may not be needed. Is it needed for some? Yes. There are people who are absolutely struggling. There are some businesses that are going to maybe never make it back. There are some businesses that survive the year taking on debt, just put everything on their credit card. So now they're here a year later when they were fine a year ago. They're at a point now where they've got $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 in debt as a small business, and that can be devastating. So yes, there are people who desperately need money. But there's also a lot of people out there who have a lot of money that they saved up that they didn't spend for the last year. And now we're giving them $5,000, $6,000 for a family of 4 in extra money. We're giving them, if they were unemployed at all, $10,000 in tax-free money at the end of the day. That's going to have a negative impact on the economy at some point. Great, everybody has money, but that will raise inflation. It was certainly not needed to be that large. And this is why we look at individuals on their own, individual issues on their own merits, instead of the Democrats are right or Republicans are right, because usually it's something in between. And anybody who's saying, I have problem X, and I only want to solve it this way, is usually doing so for political reasons, not logic. Vinny, CDC says that you get the shots and you are good to be around other people that have gotten the vaccine. Hopefully soon we will start getting back to somewhat normal. Yeah, remember something about the vaccine. The people who have gotten the shot first were the most vulnerable, the older people. So even those who don't have it yet, the younger people, are also the least vulnerable overall. So we're talking about under 55 now? In a few weeks, we'll be under 45, I believe. So I've got to wait till I'm 43, so I've got to wait a little bit longer. But which I'm not mad about, by the way. I like seeing other people be the guinea pigs first. I have no problem with that. But I'll take it when it's available to me. But okay, so the goal today was to get back on some of the state and national issues that we've talked about in the past. I know we talked a lot about the school stuff over the last week and a half or so. We will continue to talk about that leading up to Wednesday's meeting. My guess is that Wednesday's meeting will go well for parents. I think they're going to get what they want. They're going to get kids back in school, I would guess, by the end of the month. And I think that'll be good news for them. A lot of parents I've talked to just said, can't wait to get back. I do want to say thank you to I have gotten, I kid you not, every day 3 or 4 emails. We've gotten a lot of new donations in. We've gotten a lot of new people who are watching us for the first time based on this issue. And I thank you. The emails have been spectacular, and anything I can do to keep discussion going and be, make sure we have a forum for these things. I'm going to do, and hopefully we can do more state and national as well. Guys, I want to say thank you. Have a great night. It's spectacular. Oh, by the way, did you see the weather for Wednesday or Thursday? Like 50s. It's going to be amazing. And so usually what happens to the watchers live when I do this show is our live watchers go down when it's nice out. Completely get that. But they actually end up watching at night. So we actually end up with more people watching, but later at night. But yes, thank you, Jennifer. Great job. You've done a phenomenal job. The two parents, I think it's two, that started this group, I can say weren't politically motivated in any way, shape, or form. They had nobody behind them. They weren't trying to go after Hamlet. They were just trying to get their kids back in school. And when those types of people get involved and they're sincere and they want to get things going, good things happen. It's when the politicos and the activists and the people who have personal agendas get involved that it gets nasty. And I have to give a little bit of credit to Hamlet Hernandez here. If this group had gotten taken over by that, and I think they fought it off quite well, but to realize that the leaders were not about that. It wasn't a personal thing against him. They just wanted their kids back in school. And it was getting harder and harder to sit with their kids every day and seeing the emotional. I mean, I've talked to many, many parents that said the kids can't take it. There are so many kids that have started therapy in the last year. Young kids dealing with not seeing their friends, not seeing their teams, not getting into school, being in a different cohort from the groups they were friends with, home every day. There are so many kids that have been ingenious about finding ways to play video games while also being on camera during school hours, or doing even worse things with their computer, looking at things they shouldn't be. So there's the impacts on kids, the emotional, the social, and obviously educational impacts are significant. So the faster we get them into a classroom, the better. And remember, if you don't want your child to go back, that's a right you have. You're not forced to send your kid back to school. So I know there are some people, and I've gotten many emails saying, Steve, you're not giving us a voice either. I understand that you have that right not to send your kids to school. I don't want anybody believing that no one's going to force you to send them. But this option needs to be made available. And at the end of the day, we weigh, the vaccine issues and people getting sick or getting this vaccine or spreading this vaccine versus the social and emotional impacts on our kids. And we have to start deciding it's not just about the potential spread. It's also about these other impacts as well. I think those parents did a phenomenal job. Jennifer and Abby, phenomenal job. So great job, guys. And good luck on Wednesday. I hope I'll be watching, but I think you'll do fine. Kathy, Fairfield schools open fully today. We had a suicide of a teenager over the lockdowns. I think I don't know if that'll be the first one, Kathy. I get chills. I've covered so many fucking suicide. We just had a suicide. You're not a kid, but whether it's suicide or drug issues in Branford, it's almost like every few months it's just crazy. But I think there's going to be some impacts. To those kids who are getting therapy, I just acted like I don't want to act like it's a bad thing. Get therapy, get help. I mean, I'm all for that, but it has been hard for kids, and it's time we start understanding that and weighing that against the potential spread of this. All right, so in any event, I'll leave it at that. But Michael, looking forward to your first dose. I'm probably in April as well. I will see you all. It's a nice day. I'm going to get to the gym. I did Orange. I'll talk about this tomorrow. I did Orange Theory again this afternoon, which is hell, but it's an amazing workout. And that just threw me off. That suicide thing threw me off. Sorry about that. We'll be back tomorrow at 4:00, and I hope you all have a